too much freedom. Okay, this one is difficult for me because when Sergei Seidamatov and I wrote the book, Biblical Economic Policy, the first of the 10 commandments of economics we found was called People Should Be Free. And as I've studied and learned more in the 2 years since we wrote the book, I've become even more convinced that the intersection of Christianity and economics is freedom. But you can't find any society where people are perfectly free. I'm going to have more to say about that in a future podcast where I'll attempt to explain the term expressive individualism from the best book I've read this year, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Trueman. But for now, let's accept that you can't have a perfectly free society. And that's where a recent article in the Wall Street Journal comes in, titled, Housing First Foments Homelessness in California. The article is by Joe Lonsdale and Judge Glock, and it explains how the state's policies have encouraged homelessness. More than 150,000 Californians are homeless on any given night. Most of them live outside in streets and parks. More than half the country's unsheltered homeless are in the Golden State. An academic study by criminologist Richard Burke and John McDonald at the University of Pennsylvania showed that violence and death among the homeless went down when Los Angeles enforced anti-camping laws. Then it went back up when the laws were not enforced. The homeless have been granted the freedom to harm themselves and others. That's too much freedom. Here's the problem. In California, they're given government-subsidized housing with no pre-qualifications like sobriety, drug treatment, or psychiatric care. That means no matter how much you increase the supply, it will always be outstripped by demand. The article explains, research shows that policies don't work. A 2017 Journal of Housing Economics study found that cities must build about 10 new permanent subsidized homes to get even one person off the street. Now that's because many such homes end up being occupied by people who would have found a place to live anyway. Free homes are attractive, even to those who could conceivably afford to pay. California can't build 1 million free homes for the homeless, especially when recent affordable housing in the state costs upwards of $700,000 a unit to build, ending the quote from the article. Okay, let's do the math. That means it would cost $7 million to get one person off the street. 150,000 times 7 million is just over $1 trillion, just to solve the current problem. For comparison, the GDP of the entire state of California is just over $3 trillion, while the annual state budget is just over $300 billion. Now, if my math is correct, and I think it is, it would take over 3 years of the entire California state budget just to solve the current problem. And that's not even considering the moral hazard that would increase the demand for this free housing.